obligation to declare interest, and this meeting will be recorded. All mobile phones should be switched off, not just in silent or airplane mode. Okay, as they will interfere with the recording. Tablets devices to put into mute. Okay. Yep. Meeting. So, apologies. We have received apologies from Cathal Boylan, Patsy McClung, and George Robinson. Are you aware of any other apologies? No? Okay. You're very welcome, Minister. Sorry for keeping you a bit late. So if welcome Minister, Mr. Durkin, Mr. Leo O'Reilly, Permanent Secretary, Nicola, is Nicola here?
Yes.
Oh yes, Nicola, Craig, Liz Loughlin, and Helen Anderson. They're all very welcome. Good to see you all again. This will be seeing the team probably for the last time before we dissolve. So, members, just to give you some page numbers on the papers. So you have a discussion paper on proposals for taking forward the Northern Ireland climate change legislation, and that's on page 5. The Minister will also discuss the outcome of the discussion paper on an independent environment protection agency, and that's on page 4 of your tabled pack. Okay. We will probably ask the Minister on a number of issues, for example, transfer of current DOE function to the new Department and Protection of Historic Buildings. So, Minister, you have an opening statement for us? Just remind everyone, this will be recorded by Hansard.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I think, as I said the last time I visited you here at committee, I'm happy enough to forego an opening statement. I don't want to eat into the limited time that we have for members here to put questions to me. I'm sure if there's anything that they missed that I'd like to get off my chest about the work of the department or myself as Minister that we have been doing or that we intend to do in the limited time that I have left, I'll certainly volunteer that information.
Okay. Maybe just tell us a bit about the climate change conference and what did you get out of it, maybe?
Well, I think it's very important that I did go to the climate change conference and that we as an assembly and that the North as a region was represented at that. And I think it might be unique in that it was an overseas trip that the Minister went on that didn't draw criticism from any quarter whatsoever, not even from the climate change deniers among us or out there. I think that was very positive, and that showed, I think, an acceptance by people here, by the media here, and by politicians here of the importance of this subject. I think this was probably aided by the widespread media coverage, national and international media coverage of the conference itself. And I think people realised that it is important that we as a region have a part to play, and that here we were actually trying to play a part, showing leadership, going there, having the voices of Northern Ireland heard there. That's what I wanted to do. I believe that's what I did do. In terms of outcomes of the conference, the first week, the conference started with great optimism. Then, at the end of the first week of negotiations, that optimism seemed to wane, and an agreement looked less likely. Then I arrived.
My white horse.
Then I arrived, and things got back on track. There was a positive
Delighted to hear.
outcome. In my opinion, I think it could have gone further. However, the nature of agreement is that it is about compromise, and I think on the whole everyone should be reasonably satisfied of the targets that were set by the conference. They have to be signed off on now by individual countries and member states, and next month actually that will be coming out to be done. Obviously we don't have to, the UK will, but I think it was very important, as I've said, that we fed in to that UK position, as did environment ministers from Scotland and Wales also.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure that has strengthened your resolve for really trying to bring in the climate change bill. So, I mean, you have issued the issue paper and you have received responses from stakeholders and certainly from the public as well. So where are we going to go from here?
Well, I don't know that
What's
I
your
would say.
next
I don't know
step?
that I would say it has strengthened my resolve, but it has convinced me that the introduction of our own climate change legislation here is desirable and is necessary. In fact, I believe it's the only way to go. Of the regions represented at COP21, I think we were certainly in a very small minority when it came to us not having our own climate change legislation. When we look at other jurisdictions on these islands, they all do as well, and they're not hiding behind UK legislation. I think, and I've alluded to it before too, that the nature of agreement, the nature of compromise. What I was struck by was the involvement of industry in negotiations at COP21. Big multinational, global players on the business stage and their input into the negotiations. And I think that's very important, because whenever we hear scepticism about the merits of legislation here, that's generally where that's emanating from. So I think it's important that we have involvement from that sector. I know the discussion paper that you've alluded to, it has gone out. We have got responses, and while it's overwhelmingly been in favour of or supportive of the need for us to introduce our own climate change legislation here, it's not been unanimous by any means. There has been a degree of opposition, largely from the agri-food industry, which I think we all recognise as being vitally important to our economic recovery and survival here in the north. Therefore, I think it underlines the importance of working with that sector and others as partners in drawing up legislation, bespoke legislation for our unique set of circumstances here.
So are you going then to bring something further, or draft legislation, to your ministerial colleague soon?
Well,
before the end of this
you'd
mandate?
be aware that the clock is certainly, that the sands of time have almost run out on my time in office. I'm not sure I will have time to do that. I will have circulated, obviously, the findings and my analysis of the consultation that I have done on this. I think it should be a top priority for the incoming minister in the new department, and certainly I will be making that known. Hopefully I'll be back in the Assembly to make it known, but I think it's essential that this Assembly brings forward passes climate change legislation in the next mandate.
Do you think it's an advantage then for the new, for this issue of climate change to be going into the new structure with DAD and DOE together? I mean, given the fact that, as you said, the agri-food industry is totally opposed to it.
Well, they are. Well, I'm not sure we could even say that they are totally opposed to it, because what you will get in representations from that sector is that, oh, we're already doing X and Y, but we're just not doing X, Y, Z. So they are doing this. You know, a lot of them are actually going beyond environmental compliance as it is. And they're doing so not only because of the environmental benefits, but largely driven by the economic benefits that this brings to business. This is something I've also tried to highlight through the work of my department, particularly through the initiative. It's a world-leading initiative, that we've kick-started. It's around prosperity agreements and a prosperity panel that I set up where we work with businesses to, as I say, go beyond compliance, and they see the huge financial benefits of doing so. Obviously, from an agri-food point of view, you have to look at what commercial advantage this might give farmers here or producers of food in terms of the clean, green image that sells so well right across the world. I think we should be obviously working with the industry on that as well. By bringing environmental policy and agriculture together within the one department, I know you, Madam Chair, as have I, have expressed some concerns around the fact that that might not necessarily be an amalgamation of environment with agriculture as much as a subsumption. It does also create opportunities, and this is one where it does so. It helps us have people under the same roof, hopefully working towards the same goals.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, Minister, reading the responses from the agri-food industry. They're the same issues I heard many years ago. The same thing about lack of scientific evidence, about measurement, and why has there not been anything done to assure the agri industry that it is going to be a win-win situation?
Well, I think it would probably be both unfair and inaccurate to say that nothing has been done to reassure them. As I've stated, many of them are already going beyond environmental compliance and seeing the wins that that's putting in their pockets. The responses are very much the same. It was largely, and I anticipated this without the consultation, a case of round up the usual suspects, where you'll have the same people opposing this, using the same arguments. The fact is that there is even more, and even more compelling, scientific evidence now around climate change and around the need for us to act on climate change.
Okay. Well, we mentioned earlier about the transfer of function. So how confident are you that NIEA sitting in the new department that will have high priority for protection of the environment and also getting the adequate resources for it to carry out its duties?
Well, I made no secret of my concerns that amalgamation might have a negative impact on government's, if you like, commitment to environmental protection and the promotion of our natural environment. I have to say that those are concerns that aren't exclusive to me. You know, you've articulated similar views, Madam Chair, as have some members around here, and indeed have the environmental NGO sector. Those are concerns that I have listened to, and I haven't just listened to them, I've also acted on them. I have ensured that at official level work has been ongoing and intensive between officials in both departments as we work towards the establishment of the new department, and have also done all that I can to give some sort of security to that environmental NGO sector going forward as well, that they will receive some degree of protection. Well, it's not them that I'm looking to protect, but more the function that they exercise on behalf of the department to enable us to meet our targets, be they targets or directives imposed by Europe, or be they our own programme for government targets. I had established a new Natural Environment Fund that should give those groups surety, not just for the next financial year, but certainly some of them for a couple of years beyond that as well. I've employed the carrier bag levy to do so. That's good use of that fund, I believe, and that meets the commitment that was given by Alex Atwood and then by myself, that any money generated through the carrier bag levy is actually ploughed back into projects that benefit and protect our environment and our community.
Thank you, Minister. I just want to stop here and just would like to welcome the members from the delegation from the Jordanian Parliament Clacking and Research Group. You're very welcome Good morning. We are having a briefing with our Minister for the Environment.
Morning. We met there. I lost the baby.
Okay. Right. That probably brings me on to the next question on the need and the progress maybe for an independent EPA. Alban?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much, Chair. Minister, last week we went to Moyboy, and it was a very interesting visit because we saw at first hand the ravages wrought on the natural environment by illegal dumping, and it's very, very extensive and has caused serious problems in that part of County Derry, and there is great danger of that affecting adversely the River Faughan. And of course it's under investigation and so forth, and there may well be, I think there may well be a criminal trial and so forth, so I don't want to go into that. But it does highlight in my opinion anyway, the need for an independent environmental agency. And it seems to me that whilst we have talked about an independent environmental agency almost in abstract hitherto, we're now coming to a stage where we will have the transfer of functions. Amongst the functions transferred really would be largely the functions of this department, the Department of the Environment, into a ministry encompassing both the environment and agriculture. In that situation, I think that there's a great force in terms of argument that there be an EPA, because there will be a tension. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, a political tension between the priorities which the environmental side of a department would wish to set and the priorities which the agricultural side of the department would wish to set. So it seems to me that there is now an inescapable argument in favour of an independent environmental protection agency. I've noted the comments and the various indications from various sectors, and they're very, very interesting and very largely supportive of an independent agency, some of them coming from district councils as well as other bodies. So I just wanted your response to that. I know that you're, in general terms, you would be supportive of some body, but what's your thinking now on the eve of your departure from office? And perhaps that might help to shape and form future political opinions within the Assembly.
Thank you, Alban. I hope you all enjoyed your trip to Moyboy. Well, I don't know if enjoy is the correct term. I hope you endured it. Okay, it's a huge, vast site, and it's really incomprehensible. I think that the scale of illegal dumping that went on at that site did go on at that site. Just let me remind members, though, that was the work of criminals. It wasn't the work of NIEA. However, the Mills report, commissioned by my predecessor, outlined the fact that had NIEA been on top of its game, been doing things better, that this could have been avoided, or certainly its impact greatly reduced. We have taken the Mills report on board. We have implemented most of the recommendations within that report in order to get the agency itself more fit for purpose, to close the gaps that are so often and so well exploited by unscrupulous criminals whose interest is only in lining in their own pockets. They don't care if it's at the expense of other people, and they certainly don't care if it's at the expense of our planet. Alban knows well my views on the need for an independent environmental protection agency. I'll again look at other jurisdictions on these islands. They all have one, and it works well. in those areas. I know some concerns have been raised from some quarters about setting an EPA free and the fact that they wouldn't be accountable. But we don't have to look a million miles away to see how they can work well actually with government, and how they can work well for government, certainly for our people. The restructuring of government departments does and did, I think, provide a great opportunity to reopen this debate, and that's what I have done. And I think the debate has been a good one, and I think it will continue to be a good one. In terms of the public consultation document, if we can call it that, or discussion paper, it elicited some 50 responses. Overwhelmingly, those responses were in favour of the establishment of such an agency. There was some opposition, I think, from the usual suspects, I'll call them again, UFU, and also from NIPSA, obviously with concerns around the employment prospects or terms and conditions of existing members of theirs who work within the agency in the department. I think it's vitally important that we keep this subject on the table, that we do look, as we move into the new department, at the performance of the NIEA, at the treatment of the Environment Agency within the new department in terms of what they're receiving with regards to budgets, and at how the environment is prioritised within the department. And I know that the people around this table are certainly all passionate about the environment, having spent time on this committee, and I think we all have a duty to go back to our respective parties and ensure that this is something that isn't just discussed ad infinitum, but it's something that is pursued. It was probably remiss of me when we were chatting in response to your earlier question, Madam Chair, about the new department and your concerns and my concerns that environment wouldn't be front and centre of everything that the department was doing. The initial proposal to the executive was that the new department would be called the Department of Agriculture. They hadn't even recognised environment in the name, but I'm happy to say that's one battle, at least, I fought and won at the executive, to have environment in the title of the new department, and then there'd be no running away from it.
Well, I think the two alliance ministers too were quite vocal in support of adding the name. It's ludicrous not to have the name of the environment in that department.
Well, they wanted one-word titles, and I said, well, sure, the environment encapsulates agriculture rather than the other way around. But
quite right.
Chair, can I ask one further question with your indulgence? And I thank you for your response to that question, Minister. And I do genuinely hope that in the next mandate people will keep an open mind on the whole issue and not take up rigid positions and polarise the debate on this, on that particular subject. But in relation to another problem which has a local resonance for myself as an MLA for North Belfast, but also throughout Northern Ireland generally, it's the issue of knotweed. And there was, and I know your officials attended the meeting last week in relation to this. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend that aspect of the meeting because the Business Committee was meeting the Assembly, and I wasn't able to attend that aspect of the meeting. But we do have a response today from a member of the public in relation to knotweed. And I think it's important that we take that on board. And it's Mrs. Atkinson, and I think you're familiar with her case. But I'm not going to go into the case. Safe to say that it highlights the issue which I have presented before this committee before, and that is this. Yes, there are efforts being made by district councils and other public bodies, the Housing Executive and so forth, to deal with this pernicious problem, which unfortunately is now endemic in certain areas of Northern Ireland and has the potential of spreading and causing further destruction in terms of the local environment and could undermine buildings, etc., devalue property, all of that. But there is an issue raised by this case and other cases, which is where land is abandoned or where land is not owned by an individual, by a private property owner, or indeed by a public body. Knotweed grows there. Knotweed is invasive and can undermine adjoining properties that are owned by individuals, private property owners. But there is no policy by this executive or indeed by the department in relation to treating that particular problem. And it seems to me to be an avoidance of responsibility, perhaps an evasion of responsibility by the Northern Ireland executive. And I just raise that issue with you. Something has to be done because this is a public nuisance affecting individual citizens. And I do emphasise that point to you, and I take this opportunity to highlight that issue with you, Minister, today.
Okay, thank you. Alban, Japanese knotweed is something that causes me a lot of headaches as Minister, but it's something that causes a lot of people a lot of heartache right across the north and beyond in terms of the nuisance it causes them, the expense it causes them, and the difficulty they have in combating it. You, from your own legal background, Alban, you'll be aware of some of the issues that exist here as regards our ability to take people on over knotweed, but that's even where we can identify the owner of the land that the problem's emanating from. Unfortunately, in the case that you have referred to, and I appreciate you don't maybe want to go into the details of that specific case, the problem is coming from a piece of land that no one's claiming ownership of, and it's no wonder no one's claiming ownership of it whenever you look at the expense of treating Japanese knotweed. I had, and you referred to the paper that was brought to a previous meeting here, asked my officials to do more work on this issue. More work does need done. There needs to be a greater understanding of the problem, a greater understanding of ways of treating the problem. I've actually asked officials to monitor pilot projects ongoing in England where they've actually brought a superbug over from Japan that hopefully only eats Japanese knotweed. So rather than run a similar pilot here, because it could potentially be risky where you bring another invasive species in, we're monitoring how that piece of work's going on. The department also funds work by conservation volunteers to treat knotweed in certain areas. All this, I'm sure, is cold comfort to those people living with the nightmare of knotweed day and daily. It's like something out of a Doctor Who programme or something that comes through doors, comes through walls, and I often see it as almost like an analogy for the sectarianism and prejudices that it sort of exist here within Northern Ireland. You know, it's always there, it's underneath, it's extremely expensive to treat. It undermines structures that we do have, and that's why I'm looking at bringing in something from elsewhere to help us deal with it. But it is something I would seriously hope to have that paper that was brought to committee worked up into an executive paper or a memo at least to circulate around executive colleagues, because there is a need for a collective approach to this given land ownership issues. I'm not trying to pass the buck in terms of the DOE's responsibility or the Environment Agency's responsibility, but certainly where there are issues around land ownership, where you have land that was in public ownership, and I believe still is in public ownership, you need to have the right people around the table to actually put their hand up and admit to that and take responsibility for it. That's where I think even maybe the community planning process within the new councils might reap some or yield some benefits as well, in terms of having people from the appropriate agencies all around the one table. And you know yourself, when you have people around the one table looking at each other, it's harder for them to pass the parcel.
Chair, I just thank the Minister for that, and I hope it will be a priority for the incoming executive to deal with this pernicious problem. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you as Minister for your work over the past number of years. I think it's been, I think you've done significant work in terms of enhancing protection for the environment and other matters, including dealing with the problems arising out of road traffic accidents and so forth. And I want to thank you for that work.
Hear, hear. Yes.
But even, I was thinking there, if a further piece of work was done across the departments to identify how much money government departments, individual government departments have had to spend tackling the problem of knotweed, it would certainly be a good way to help concentrate minds on a solution as well.
Absolutely.
Officials
Thank you,
last time talked about maybe the Challenge Fund could have a project to deal with this issue.
Yeah, well, like I said, money has been allocated to conservation volunteers who have been doing work on this issue. I've actually been out on site with them and seen the work that they were doing, and it's so vast, and the actual treatment of this invasive species is so prolonged and difficult as well. You can't just come along and spray it and it goes away. You have to keep coming back and keep coming back, or it keeps coming back. You just don't want to make it angry.
Although that was the impression given to us by the officials at last week's, or at the meeting, when they talked about it, they said you could just go to a shop and buy chemicals and spray them. I think they said 2 to 3 years, although Mrs. Atkins has written back and said that's not the right way to do it. It takes 7 to 10 years and quite inexpensive.
It's a war, not a battle.
As well. Yeah. Ian, do you want to come back to about EPA or another issue?
I would like to ask the Minister, and thanks for your presentation, or your presence here this morning, right?
But lots of
just to follow up, and
I'm sorry, we won't be able to give you a present, a full-way present.
It's my birthday today.
All right, well, happy birthday, Minister. However, going on, I want to go back to the point that Alban made, about the visit to my boy, and it was only after being there last week that we saw the extent of the operation that was there to place 1 million tonnes probably of waste. And when we talk about the extent of it, we talk about 100 acres, like 100 acres at maybe an average of 4 metres deep right across the whole thing. And what I would like to know is that, would you be confident, regardless of an Environment Protection Agency or whatever, right? The here and now is on us, right? And the question is, when people were fit to do that, you say criminals were fit to do that, but they manipulated, perhaps government agencies or councils and all the rest of it, right? All along the way, right? So what protections is there now, or would you be confident that from here on in, that type of operation would never ever happen again? And the second point that I would ask regarding my boy is, who is going to fund, the clean-up? We've been told that there's going to be some kind of a document issued at the end of the year, as to how they intend to deal with it. Who is going to, foot the bill for that? Thanks, Minister.
Okay, and thank you, Ian, and again, I suppose acknowledge the scale of the site and the scale of the problem and the scale of the crime. I think it's very important that we do everything that we can to assure the public that every step that can be taken is being taken to ensure the suppose safety, particularly of the local drinking water supply. I mean, this is a site adjacent to the River Faughan, from which 60% of Derry's drinking water comes. So, I mean, to that end, we have been working very hard to ensure that there is no leachate or that going in to that. I've asked for increased water monitoring. Obviously, Northern Ireland Water carry out their own monitoring. and they have found there to be no issue to date. Again, I've asked for even further monitoring. I just live half a mile away from it, so and I drink the water.
I get you.
I might not be a great advert for it right now. Makes your hair fall out.
Makes you grow tall.
And purple or something.
Makes you grow tall.
But
Not more than that.
sorry, Ian, I got way
Drink
there.
the water. The water
I
was good.
went off on one
Sure,
there.
it was water.
Esquivaja.
Let's go.
We went, as regards the clean-up, that is something that is going to be very expensive. I had a preliminary look at a report brought to me by officials, given a sort of range or menu of solutions and prices. That's not something that's going to be again done or decided on overnight. There are a range, like I said, the most expensive probably including taking all that is there out. However, we have to look at what's best for the environment. There is every possibility that disturbing waste that has been there for that length of time will actually create a greater risk to the environment. So the other options include treating the waste where it is. The option that will be decided on will be the one that is best for the environment. However, we have to ensure that it's also the one that provides best value to the public purse here as well. I'm firmly of the belief that the polluter should pay. I think it would be naive to expect you're going to get a polluter anyway, where who's going to foot this bill. But it's important that we get off them everything that we can. That case is now before the courts. I can't comment too much on that, but I'd be hopeful of a positive outcome for the environment from that. I think it's also important in terms of setting out a tough message to existing waste criminals and potential waste criminals. I think it's something where maybe in the past the courts have been overly lenient and the deterrents haven't matched the potential harm and damage done by this sort of crime. This is certainly not a victimless crime. This causes huge damage to the environment, but it also is costing a fortune to the public purse. We're talking about the cost of clean-up, but to date we've spent £1.2 million on site.
That's only investigation.
Yeah, and then as regards safeguards, to ensure that sort of thing doesn't happen again, obviously we can never say never. I think the handing down of tougher sentences would go some way to act as a deterrent. But by implementing the recommendations of the Mills report, we have, and I think the term it used, closed the gaps that were exploited. And there were gaps within NIEA, and we'd certainly put our hands up to admit that there were issues around planning as well. There were issues with the local council, and where things aren't tightly meshed, there always will be people who look for space to exploit for their own ill-gotten gain.
No, thanks very much, Minister, and I'll not take any more time up because I know you're probably wanting to get away, but thanks very much.
Yeah. Barry, you want to ask?
I thank you, because it is related. It's related to environmental protection. I suppose I'm very aware at this time of the massive concerns in a number of local communities. I'll go even to two counties here. In Tyrone, obviously, the gold mining, but not so much the gold mining per se, but the use of a cyanide processing plant, it might be described as. And then secondly, near Carrickfergus, oil drilling there. What assurances can the Minister and the Department offer those communities who are fearful that this could lead to major issues of public health and polluting drinking water and rivers, etc.?
No, thank you for the question, Barry. It's not like you could go beyond the one county.
So it's non-parochial.
So that's where I'll start with regards to the concerns that exist within the Greencastle community, largely within your own constituency. I'm well aware of them, having met some representatives of the community up here a few weeks ago with your party colleague. I think they were having a public meeting down there last night as well, and it is evident that there are serious concerns, and I probably say those concerns are well justified in terms of some of the proposals, or what they have heard about some of the proposals coming forward. What I would say is there is to date no planning application has been received on this. What you're seeing now are the outworkings of a pre-application community consultation. That's something that now has to be carried out on major and regionally significant proposals. And that's something that I had introduced, and I think that's good. Whereas previously, if you go back a couple of years, the first that the people in the community might have heard of this is when they got a letter in from Planning Service saying, "Oh, this is proposed down the road from you. You have 2 weeks to get your objection." And so this has allowed, I suppose, time for the community to seek further information and further clarification. And I believe that's time that the applicant should use to engage with the community, I suppose, to do their best to allay any concerns that the community do have. I know as soon as someone hears that cyanide is going to be put into the ground, that naturally you're going to be concerned and worried. But like I say, the company might have a way of presenting that to them that goes some way to allaying those concerns. I'm not sure that they will. I haven't met the company yet to discuss these proposals, although they have sought and are seeking a meeting with me, so I will be meeting them, and I'd probably expect to engage with the community again on this. I know they have kindly invited me down to the area. I said I will get down. Unfortunately, I haven't got a date yet to go down and meet them and see firsthand the area that they're talking about. With regards the infrastrata one that you were talking about, yes, I'm aware of concerns there. You referred to it as oil drilling. I'd have to say what is going on at the minute, although there are huge concerns about it, as exploratory drilling. It's been done through or under permitted development rights that did exist. Subsequent information, while that permitted development was granted by the department, responsibility for that has now passed to the council. During that time, further information has come in. It's a matter of public record. I had written to the council to suggest that they might wish to revisit or at least re-examine the granting of permitted development rights. But what the company is doing there is legal. I've also made it known to my officials that I'd like to just look at the issue of permitted development, and while it's great in terms of, in some cases, smaller agricultural buildings or minor extensions to your house that you might need to go through the whole rigmarole of the planning process, when you look at something on the scale of what is going on in Woodburn, it's hard to envisage how that shouldn't have to apply for planning permission. Again, this is something that there has been a lot of public interest in. I've had a letter from the Incredible Hulk on. I think it made him angry. But like I say, jurisdiction for it has now passed to the council. I would say, should this exploratory drilling find that there is a resource in the ground that the company then think would be worthwhile exploiting, they will have to come in with a full application, and that would be the subject of huge scrutiny.
Would that go to the strategic planning division?
I would envisage that it would, yes.
Okay, Barry?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alistair, you've been really patient. Alistair was the
Always
first one to
patient.
say he wanted to ask a question. Yes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister and the Department being here and officials. And also should start by saying happy birthday. And enjoy the rest of your day, whatever is planned. After the recent storms and flooding issues that we've had and experienced this year, right across Northern Ireland and of course right across the UK, and I know it's a cross-departmental issue, and I know we had a very nice protocol at one stage that promised all these things that were going to happen in relation to flooding. But what plans are now being put in place, or what plans have been put in place to sort of work towards flooding prevention going into the future? And which department is actually going to take the lead on this?
Okay, thank you, Alistair. When it comes to the flooding, well, my department has a couple of responsibilities. Obviously, we have responsibility for climate change policy, and the longer that climate change goes on unchecked, the more frequently we're going to see and feel severe weather events such as flooding. So again, I think that just allows me to re-emphasise the need for us to introduce climate change legislation here. The DOE also has responsibility for an emergency financial assistance scheme, which is well publicised and has been well availed of since it was first introduced in 2007 and 2008. It allows payments of up to £1,000 to be paid to households that have suffered as a result of flooding, and the payments are issued through councils. That's how the DOE, or why DOE run the scheme, and the payments can be issued virtually immediately. A building control officer, environmental health officer can attend the scheme and basically write a cheque. It's not a compensation payment, but it allows people who have suffered the damage and the distress of their home being flooded to make their home habitable again as soon as possible. Now, as far back as November 2014, not last November, I tabled a paper to the executive looking to amend that scheme. I wanted to make it a standing scheme so that I don't have to go along every couple of months, or whoever the minister with responsibility doesn't have to go along every couple of months asking for permission to open the scheme. I wanted it to be a standing scheme which would allow it to work even more quickly. You know, if there is a severe weather incident that's completely unexpected and no one sees coming. I also wanted to look at the possibility of extending that scheme so that it could be availed of not just by households, but by businesses, small businesses, as I put it, community facilities, and churches who currently can't avail of it. It was when the church in my own constituency was flooded that I became aware of this, and the officials were telling me, no, it's not a house. I tried telling them it's the house of God, but to no avail. It's one of them says, oh, he can walk on the water. But so I had tabled that paper and redrafted it and redrafted it and redrafted it. And I think it then was maybe at version number 6 come December. It was at that stage in Westminster, there was the announcement by George Osborne of a Westminster flooding fund. And again, I had sought off DUP, DFP, did I say DUP? The DFP clarification as to whether there would be a barrack consequential to that, whether we would get a slice of that cake to deal with the flooding that we were facing here in the north. And after asking and asking and asking, we elicited a response that, yeah, there'd be £1.3 million. I believe, had it not been for me asking and asking and asking, that money wouldn't be used to deal with flooding here. It has been decided by the executive, and I think quite correctly, that money should be put into flood prevention and mitigation and adaptation measures, rather than given to me or whatever minister to dole out in compensation payments. Prevention is definitely better than cure. Schemes or proposals were brought forward then by the DARD minister and the DRD minister as to how that could be spent on strategic schemes that would alleviate repetitive and serious flooding in some areas, and that had my full support. In the meantime, my request to have the emergency financial assistance scheme extended just kept bobbing along and wasn't going anywhere. So I've tried to keep that to the fore, and then having sat on it for over a year, the executive then decided that it would be better to be progressed by DARD and DFP. That was voted on, I think, on the 20th of January, but there has been no further progress. I haven't heard any more about it, even though I've written asking for an update. The one thing, I mean, I was particularly concerned about businesses and community facilities that had been or had suffered flooding during our most recent bit of flooding during December and January, that they wouldn't be able to avail of the scheme if it was, even if the businesses were to be eligible for it. And I think now that ship has sailed, that they won't be. Other schemes being brought forward by ministerial colleagues, though the Dard Minister has announced an individual property protection scheme, which I think is a very good one, where again people living in areas that are prone to flooding can avail of a scheme, and the grant of, I think it's up to £10,000 they put in flood protection measures around their homes. And I think that's to be made available to businesses as well, or extended to businesses as well.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come back, Minister, just, you know, I hear what you're saying in relation to that flooding fund, and I appreciate that you did make the efforts and that you have pushed that ahead. But sadly, it hasn't been extended to businesses and, as you've mentioned there, community groups and churches and the like, because all of those did suffer a great deal of damage. And, you know, it's all very well talking about these things, but whenever something like this does happen, people do look for some sort of help and assistance. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to actually push that something like this is put in place, that at least it's there as an emergency fund, that businesses can get £1,000 towards that clean-up operation. There's a lot of small businesses, and I'm talking small businesses, affected right across Northern Ireland, and that £1,000 would have went some way along to help and alleviate, and churches as well. So I think it's something that we do need to push to try and get sorted.
Without a doubt, and any support from any quarter would be and is greatly appreciated. I know very well, like, talking about it's one thing, doing it's another. I've visited businesses affected in a few constituencies, Cannigo or in Clady as well, and trying to explain the intricacies of how the executive works, or how in this case hasn't worked, doesn't hold much water, if you pardon the expression.
Although, I mean, it's useful to have that £1,000 to help people to clean up and compensate, or not compensate, but help afterwards. People would prefer money to put in measures to prevent it to happen in the first place.
Oh yeah, and like I said, Dard are bringing forward a scheme on that. Do you know when that has been announced by the Dard Minister? But we are where we are, and these people have been flooded, and people and businesses will continue to be flooded. Not all of them are going to avail of the flood protection before the next flood.
I know.
If you like, so it would be good to be able to help people out.
Yeah, and if it occurs, you know, frequently, then they don't get insurance. It's a big problem.
Yeah. Oh well, that's a huge difficulty for businesses in particular.
Yeah, sure. Then we are then. Do you want to talk about built heritage? Is the end?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Again, Minister, the question is, concerns have been raised regarding the priority given to built heritage, since the transfer of functions. How will the Department ensure that appropriate resources are put in place to support this function?
Thank you, Ian. Well, I think our built heritage is extremely important, and if you look at the record of the Department over the past 4 years, you'll see that record investment had been made or put into our built heritage. Unfortunately, this financial year, the only money available to me as Minister to put into built heritage was through the carrier bag levy, and then legislation dictates that that has to go to, there has to be a community benefit in where that is spent. So I had to look at community buildings, so that would be community facilities, and churches qualified for it as well. So we were only able to allocate 500,000, but I think I saw somewhere 585,000 did I? On built heritage, which was great for the buildings that were able to avail of it. And we do see the value of investing in heritage. For every £1 of public money spent or invested in our built heritage, there's a further £7 spent generated. So it was loath to me to actually not be able to spend more there. While the carrier bag levy, though, with the new departments and DOE going three ways, if you like, built heritage is going to go in the Department of Communities, or Department for Communities, and the carrier bag levy is going into DAERA. But I have ring-fenced the fund of, again, it is just £500,000 to go over into the Department of Communities exclusively for built heritage. It will, however, be up to the new minister of that new department to decide how much more they want to put into that, or if they even want to put that into it. I think great opportunities.
Sorry, this is for 16, 17, is that right?
Yeah, I do think opportunities exist now too, and they have been out and about with councils, and opportunities exist in better collaborative working with through the new department, particularly the Department of Communities, with the councils on the issue of built heritage. I think there's no one really better placed than councils to realise the economic value that the restoration and regeneration of particular buildings can have for their area. I mean, just tomorrow, actually, I'm going to the opening of a new hotel in Derry, which has created 60 jobs, but that was a listed building, and that has benefited from previously from a DOE grant and indeed from a DSD urban regeneration grant. So these things pay. It pays everyone for us to invest in the built heritage, and I'd like to have been in a position this year to put more into it. Like I say, the previous few years we put in record sums, and hopefully the new minister in the new department will be equally committed to it.
Okay, well, I understand where you're coming from, but you know the 500,000 that has been allocated. I'm reading in front of me here that it probably funded about 6 projects, and there's something like 200 projects that are still outstanding. And while I understand what you're saying about the benefits there for community buildings, if you like, for employment and all of that, there are some cottages. One in my own area is called Katie McKenna's Cottage. And once these buildings are gone, they're gone forever. And at the minute there, this particular building is sitting there with the roof falling down through. There has been a grant awarded, but the money isn't there. So, like, another year, this building here will be just beyond repair. So, like, these are the buildings. While the priority, how do we prioritise?
Yeah,
it's okay saying, about the stuff that you're saying, and I appreciate everything you're saying, right, and all of that. But how do we get to these small cottages that are in a state now that we could lose them forever?
No, there is and will be a prioritisation. You alluded to a list of 200 there. First, I think that list is way too long. What happened here is that the door was left open long after the cupboard was bare, and like letters of offer had been issued and issued and issued when there was nothing there, and I think that's completely wrong and unacceptable, and that it built expectation across the community in many areas. But of the buildings on that list, then there is a prioritisation among them, and it won't be based on just like job creation possibility. Buildings will be looked at on, I suppose, the basis of the intrinsic value of that building, be it from a historical point of view or architectural point of view and so forth.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come in that. Happy birthday, by the way.
We have to sing you a song.
Happy birthday.
Those who can sing.
You lead off.
Just on the back of...
Happy birthday, Mr. Minister. No.
Well, he's a jolly good fellow.
Just in the back of Ian's comments there in regard to, and indeed in the back of the flooding comments as well, regard to built heritage. And I know I mean, George Robinson wanted to be here today and couldn't be here today, and he wanted to raise something specifically about a cottage as well in his constituency, and I think he's probably been in touch with you already about it. And that's another example of, you know, of a building that may well be lost in the very near future if action isn't taken. And I know you're out in Upper Bann as well, and so friends of mine, their cottage, and the severe impact that the flooding has had on their very beautiful property, 300-year-old thatched cottage that, you know, nobody wants to see melt away, for want of a better word. And it is a real concern as to how we're not looking after these and how we're not able to fund the protection measures that we need to protect these kind of properties, because we are going to lose them. And as Ian says, they're lost forever once they go. So it was just to reiterate my concern that, you know, some of the most beautiful properties in Northern Ireland could be lost because there is no resource there to actually preserve them.
Okay, no, it is important that we make every effort to protect our built heritage, and I mean, I had made a bid during a monitoring round, or to a monitoring round during the year for more money specifically for built heritage. Unfortunately, that bid was unsuccessful with regards to the specific properties that you mentioned. The one in Mr. Robinson's constituency, I have to say, there has been engagement with officials on that for some 7 or 8 years, and they've been invited to put in an application long before the cupboard was bare, long before. However, they really only got their own act together after it was too late, unfortunately. However, my officials are engaging with them and other statutory agencies who do have a role to play there. I know DSD and the Housing Executive have been involved and proactive around how we can assist the elderly couple, or sorry, the elderly brother and sister who are living in the property as well at Seacoast Road and McGilligan. With regards to the other one, I had visited that was subject to awful flooding, perhaps among the worst flooding that I had seen here even over the past couple of months. Departmental architects are going out, or may have already been out, to visit and look at potential solutions to that problem in terms of mitigation against future flooding incidents. I know it had been flooded in the 1920s or something, if I recall, similarly, but it's shocking just to think that it has stood there 300 years against all of the elements, and it's important that we do what we can to ensure that it doesn't fall down on our watch, if you like.
Absolutely.
Do you want to ask about taxi
Yeah,
regulation?
that'd be great, yes.
Sorry, just one point on that.
Sorry, just quickly, Alistair.
Sorry, Chair, just one point just one point of clarification maybe I'm looking. I agree with my other colleagues here who mentioned about the protection of our built heritage, because it is very, very important. You just mentioned a fund, 500,000. Is that the fund that was available just to help and assist those properties? I'm just looking clarification on that.
That's what is going over from DOE as it is now to the new Department of Communities.
To help and assist built heritage. It's just coming from a construction
But that can
background.
be grown. You know, that doesn't go as far as we would like.
That's the only point that I'm making. 500,000 seems okay looking at it very quickly, but coming from a construction background that I come from, on the surveying background, that is only a drop in the ocean.
Referred to the previous 500, it was used up in just barely more than half a dozen major projects.
Because any works required in around built heritage is expensive. That's the first point. To get the tradesmen to actually carry out the work, it's expensive. So, you know, monies like that would just go within seconds, really.
Exactly.
You can just spend on one project 500,000.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, again, that's why I think we should look at and exploit the opportunities that exist working with councils and being able to, in terms of attracting funding from elsewhere, you know, be it through the HLF, because there are opportunities out there that quite a few projects in the north have been successful in terms of drawing down funding for as well.
Pam?
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I just want to ask you some questions about the taxi regulations, but just before I do that, I want to quickly ask you, have to get a wee bit of river pollution in somewhere. But it was really to ask if you or your department have any discussions or are planning to have any discussions with the judiciary around fines, and in particular about fines that are made for convictions of pollution via agriculture. You be quiet. Deliberate pollution incidents. I can think of, I'm not going to name it, but I can think of a very specific one within my constituency, where it's known who exactly is polluting. He has been convicted, but obviously it obviously pays him to pay the fine and not to dispose properly of the waste that he's supposed to be disposing of. Has there been any discussions with judiciary by way of encouraging them to up their game in order to...
It's not a discussion I've been involved directly in. I've had the discussion with the Justice Minister, and I know it's something that I have said publicly, certainly on more than one occasion, about the need for tougher sentences. We were discussing waste crime earlier, and I said that's really what you do need to act as a deterrent for this type of reprehensible act. I would say that the vast majority of pollution incidents are accidental. That does not mean that they're acceptable either.
Are you intending to have any?
No. Well, that's certainly something I'll speak to the officials about, because you will acknowledge that I have been proactive on this issue, as have my officials, and I think it's something where the department have been able to learn through their engagement with angling groups in your area, and I'd like to see it replicated right across the north as well, in terms of building relationships and drawing on the expertise and passion for the environment that does exist out there on the ground.
Yeah, and you maybe perhaps speak to your executive colleagues in DARD and DCAL as well, and see what, even if there could be a grouping together of that conversation to be had.
No,
I
certainly.
think that would be useful. Thank you. Under the taxi regulations, do you have an update in relation to the drafting of the regulation or the dead miles issue?
Yeah, I know that was due to come to you today.
Yeah.
It's been delayed. It's en route, and it'll be with you next week for definite. I have it. I just haven't had the opportunity to look at it and sign off on it yet.
Okay, because that is a big issue.
Oh no, it is a big issue, and there are several big issues that remain out there around the Taxi Act and the subsequent regulations. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and if we look just at the Taxi Act and the regulations that have trickled through since then, I think it might be an example of how not to do things. The first thing that a new minister with responsibility for this is going to have to do is commence a review of the Taxi Act, and hopefully get it righter.
And I think, Minister, that would be very welcomed by the whole industry. Although there's concern that and I don't think anyone in this committee was terribly happy with the regulations, and feeling that we had to let it go, for want of a better word, so we could move forward on the issue and give clarity to the industry. But there is a lot of confusion out there, and certainly I've had conversations, and you'll probably get a request today from my office, actually looking for a meeting to, on behalf of someone who's actually installing the equipment and dealing with what's approved, and the mixed messages they're getting from the department on what can be used, what's approved, what's not approved, with new equipment which seems to be out of the list, which wasn't previously approved, and there's 1,000,001 issues there which you couldn't possibly go into today, but it would be good to get an urgent meeting with you on that subject, so that the likes of this company can actually get on with the work that needs to be done for the implementation of these regulations in May, 31st of May. And I'm just wondering, actually, is that date immovable, or is there going to be any more time given as a leading period to... It's just a question off the top of my head. Because I know even in the tax industry there's confusion as to whether they actually have to have the meters and printers, for instance, installed by the end of May or not, or whether that's the date from which it's kind of being trickled in. So
No, well, I was discussing the same this morning. I've discussed it before. This morning, I am aware of issues that have been raised by media suppliers and also by drivers
Yeah.
about sort of the short lead-in time until the end of May. The suppliers think there might be too much demand for them to cope with. By that time, I've met some of them, and I won't be averse to meeting your constituents on this either. I'm taking soundings from a range of areas on this. I think when I say it's been rushed in, or it appears to them that it's been rushed in, to say it hasn't just dropped out of the sky. People have and should have known it was coming, but I think these meters took on almost mythical proportions.
Yeah.
People thought, it's never
It's
going
never
to happen.
going to happen, yeah, I
It's
think-
never going to happen.
think
Then to be
that's
told, right, it's happening, and it's
Yeah.
happening by May, and it might still have somehow managed to take the industry by surprise. But I mean, I'm listening, and I think I've demonstrated before, I'm fairly responsive to these issues, so I'm not going to say anything just on it now in terms
Okay.
of the date being immovable, but it's
Okay.
certainly something I'm looking at.
Okay,
Although
thank
you have to say the industry says what, more than, well, from 2008 to now, it's nearly 10 years, prepared themselves for it.
Well, like I said, I think it is an example of maybe how not to do things, and I think that the problem is that all the best politicians are driving taxis.
There is a concern, and I'm, obviously we could listen to the concerns of the taxi industry, but I would be very concerned for the consumer on the ground that the implications of a lot of the workings of these regulations may mean in the future that we actually have less taxis available. And I know there are concerns from the taxi industry that in relation to the tariff issue around the bigger taxi buses and the wheelchair accessible vehicles, those kind of vehicles, that the charging structure, the way it's set up, may actually mean a lot of these vehicles, which take heavy investment by some taxi owners, may mean that they actually just park them up and don't use them.
Yeah.
And we have less availability then, which completely goes against the whole.
Yeah,
ethos of
well, if that May date were to move, it wouldn't be a case of it just being kicked down the road a couple of months. A lot would have to happen. I mean, a lot already has to happen between now and May in terms of providing clarification to the industry.
Yeah.
And you've just mentioned a couple of issues there that
Yeah.
there's confusion over, and there are.
Yeah.
999,999 more, because he says there were a million and one, and we do need to work with them to clarify that for the industry and for the consumer.
Yeah.
I know there was panic on the streets of Derry when this maximum fare sheet appeared online, and it must have been shared 1,000 times on Facebook, and it virtually would have meant that the prices of taxis in my constituency would have doubled. So people were panicking, and that was the maximum fare, which won't be implemented by any of the companies or independent drivers at home.
No doubt it is a massive issue. In relation to the review, you've mentioned that it'll be for the new department, obviously, to take on. But the terms of reference haven't been drafted yet for that review.
Not yet.
And have you a timescale in mind for the start and duration of the review?
Well, like I say, it will be up to the new minister, but I think it should commence immediately.
Okay.
Does it not say in the legislation that it will be a year after the implementation?
No.
Okay.
And don't forget, the Act was passed in 2008, so...
2008 was passed.
Well, it got royal assent in 2008, so...
Finally, for me on this, will there be a communication campaign for consumers to make them aware of the new arrangements? Once we have the actual taxi industry.
Yeah, well,
educated
I
and
think
fully
that is
communicated with.
very important, and referred to the panic caused by, misinformation.
Yeah.
It being put out maybe through mischief on some counts, but I think it is vitally important that this is communicated to the industry and to the consumer as well. So we need to get in line exactly what we're communicating to them. Like I say, there is still a bit of work to be done here, definitely.
You've a lot of work to do in the last few weeks.
I know.
Wish you well with that. Thank you.
Alistair, quick.
Chair, just quick point on the back of what Pam has said there in relation to the taxis and the taxi regulations, because I know my offices have been sort of inundated with issues around this whole process. And one of the points that has been made, and it's really only a point that some of the taxis drivers are making, is that it's actually going to probably increase the amount of illegal taxis. This is what they're telling us, because they're a bit over-regulated now is what they see. So they're saying there's the possibility of more illegal taxis because they're cheaper and so on and so forth. And it's something that we, that shouldn't be happening. But that's what they're just coming in and saying and telling us. The other thing is that they're also saying, and this is just again for your information, is what they're saying is there seems to be more enforcement and regulations on the actual legal taxi drivers. We need to be pushing more the fact of catching the illegal taxi drivers and making sure that they're put out of business.
I concur 100%. It's unfortunately much easier for enforcement officers out on the ground to stop a guy with a taxi sign on his roof than one that doesn't. This is something I think that we do need the cooperation of the community on as well, because people are putting themselves at risk as well, getting into unapproved, non-licensed taxis. Should they be involved in an accident, God forbid, the implications could be very serious, also in terms of insurance and things like that.
Enforcement is an issue, the lack of resources for enforcement, in your department is a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have actually put more resource into enforcement as a direct request from a committee here, maybe 18 months ago or more. I had done that and then started receiving letters from MLAs complaining about there being too much enforcement or the nature of that enforcement. But I do agree that we need to be going after the bandits.
Okay, William?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and can I thank the Minister for his time. He's been very helpful and approachable to me at all times, so I thank you very much for that. In relation to planning, and I know it's handed on to councils and you're responsible for policy, but I had one businessman this morning, just was coming down the motorway around me. There's an application in from 2011, and it's still not cleared. I spoke to a case officer yesterday afternoon, and he told me he was dealing with one application back from 2007. Surely more can be done to try and stop this sort of thing. Business, I'm not so sure how we come to arrive at a position where business is not stymied because of this. It is happening.
No, it definitely is happening, and I'd love to be able to say, it's an issue that's the council responsible for planning, but if those applications have been there that long,
that's why
the problem certainly didn't start with council. What I would say is that usually there's more than one side to every story. Do you know what I mean? I think if someone puts in a comprehensive application with all the boxes ticked and everything done that's required, there's no way it would take that long. But then there's certainly maybe work to be done in terms of communication, but between planners, whoever's meant to be assessing the application and recommending a decision on the application, and the applicant. I mean, if there is a deficiency or if there is information lacking in a certain area, they should be going back quickly to the applicant saying, you need to get this in, or this won't progress any further. I do think, and we're seeing it, I'm seeing it on the news on a very regular basis from a Belfast City Council perspective. I've also seen the evidence of it more recently in my own constituency in the council there, that the councils are almost better placed in a way now to identify what's going to have economic benefit for their council area and to prioritise those applications that create employment as well. Like you'll see in Belfast, there's a fucking hotel approved every couple of weeks, but by the looks of it, whereas I do know historically, planning service hasn't been that quick, and I mean I could dig out the statistics that show how planning service has improved over the past few years, but the fact is the only applications that you hear about or that I hear about are the ones that there have been problems with.
I had a meeting the other day with a UK-wide communications organisation that tells me that Northern Ireland is the worst part of the United Kingdom for getting things approved. So there's something wrong when that's the case, you know what I mean?
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. I've heard similar things, not just in terms of planning. Like I don't know how many people come in and tell me how the streets are paved with gold in Scotland. That happens. People look at where performance hasn't been great, and I'll admit performance has been far from perfect. I can point to improvement in performance, but it's certainly far from good enough still, in my opinion.
Well, hopefully local councils, well, I know it's early days yet, but hopefully they can make a difference. I'd be hopeful that, you know, because it is localised more, and they do know there's one particular, on that one of those applications, they have even got a letter of support from the council for that application. And but of course,
the council might have a conflict of interest. Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Call it in.
Okay.
Yes, yes. One last question?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks. It's about this ETSU 97, right? You know,
Yes.
I've heard you speaking in the chamber and that about it, right? And as my understanding is there that it's a measure that's guide, you know, to planning for noise and all of that in Great Britain. But we have had reports here, you know, from somebody from Queen's or Ulster University.
Ulster University.
Ulster University, and they said there that they believed, you know, that ETSU 97 was out of date, unfit for purpose, right? You know, so how do we go if we get a report in this chamber here, you know, regarding that, and then we're told no, you've got it wrong. You know, we carry on with what we're doing here. You know, how can we try and change that or bring changes about?
Well, I know that did form part of the committee's report and the wind energy, and I'm pleased to be able to tell you today that in the very near future, the next few days, in fact, I will be launching a call for evidence into the full and comprehensive review of the Planning Policy Statement 18, which pertains to renewable energy, and PPS 21 as well. You'll be glad to hear, Barry.
Okay.
You know, and so the committee's review will very much be considered as part of that review.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay.
Thanks.
That's all the question. Well, thank you very much, Minister. You've been really very good spending so much time for us, and happy birthday. And really, on behalf of the committee, I want to say we're really very, very appreciative of your cooperation and your really willingness to work with the community on many, many issues. So thank you very much to you and your staff.
No, well, thank you very much, Chair, and members of the committee, I suppose, for working with me, and I think that's what it's all about. We have been very much working with each other rather than against each other. As I referred to earlier, I think I've demonstrated that I can be and usually am responsive, and I very much take on board the views of the committee, because these are right now and again about a few things. But I'd like to thank you, Anna, for your chairmanship of the committee, and all the members for their contributions throughout. I'm not sure how many survivors there are from my first meeting here. Not an awful lot. We've had a few changes of the guard, but I think everyone that has come in has had a keen interest, obviously, in the environment. And like I said, I hope that's not something that you leave at the door when you leave here, and maybe next year aren't on the same committees. The more people that among us as legislators that are educated about and passionate about the protection and promotion of our environment, the better, and that can help better inform the decisions of our political parties and us as an assembly moving forward. Okay.
Could I call for your resignation?
Within the next few weeks.
Thanks very
That's
much.
another one on
Yeah.
the to-do.
Best of luck, Minister. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we go back.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm going to fly through. That's okay. Members. So we are now on to then chairperson's business, nothing. Item 3. Item 4, minutes. Members agree the minutes?
Yep.
Matters arising, item 5.4, 5.1 is on page 48. It's a response from the department to issues raised by taxi driver regarding taxi legislation. Members, are you content to note and copy the response to the individual who raised this matter with the committee? Okay, happy with that. Then item 5.2 is on consultation on the draft policy guidance on identification and destination of quiet areas, and this is a response then from the department stating that it plans to approach Belfast City Council and Mid East Antrim Borough Council with a view to meeting with in early or mid-March to discuss concerns raised during the consultation. It will provide an update to the incoming committee. In the new mandate, it also states that adoption of these of areas will not require legislative change, and that there will be future scope to review the quiet area criteria and consider further areas following the publication of Round 3 noise maps in June 2017. So, members, are you content to note?
Note.
Okay, and also we received correspondence previously from the Belfast Airport Watch Group. So, members, are you content that we send there at the departmental response to that group as well?
Yep.
Okay. Next item 5.3 on page 52 is correspondence from the department providing updates on CGN and Rose Energy projects. Members, are you, and also and a response to issues raised by Windwatch NI regarding the collapse of a wind turbine at Scracker wind farm. So, members, are you content to note and copy the relevant part of the response to Windwatch NI?
Thank you.
Okay. Then item 5.4 on page 55 is correspondence from Derry City and Strabane Council regarding the committee's request for its views on the transfer of functions order. The council has expressed its dissatisfaction with the timescale and is therefore unable to provide comment. Members, would you agree that we write back to the council to advise them that the timescale was really imposed on the committee? It wasn't our timescale. So just to clarify that point. Okay, item 5.5 on page 56 is a response from Amma Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council regarding Japanese knotweed. Members, are you content to note that?
Yep.
Yeah.
And also, there's an email too from Elizabeth Atkinson at page 36 of your tabled paper. Mrs. Atkinson has expressed concern regarding some of the evidence given by officials at last week's committee meeting on Japanese knotweed, particularly in relation to homeowners treating knotweed on adjacent sites using particular products. Ms. Atkinson states that it needs specialist treatment and will take a treatment plan of 7 to 10 years. So, members, do you wish then to forward the email to the department for a response to the issues raised by her?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yep, I think.
Members.
Sorry, Ian. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I just want to say I think it's very important that you do, because like there seems to be a conflict here, in and how Japanese knotweed has been dealt with. You know,
Yeah.
we clearly heard last week that he said you could treat it there with Roundup or some of the other poisons that are on the market. You know, and so no, I think we should.
Yeah. I mean, it sounded so easy.
Yeah.
It was after the meeting.
Yeah,
I
it's
thought,
like
oh,
off the
well,
cuff,
why
uh-huh.
have they not done it before?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Members, would you agree that if we send Ms. Atkinson a letter to say that we are keeping this issue in our legacy report to pass on to the next committee? So that
Yes, Chair. I mean, you can judge by the tone of her letter, not just simply the words, but the tone of her letter, that she's totally frustrated,
Yes.
indeed exasperated by the way in which this matter was dealt with by the DOE officials last week.
Yep.
You can understand that.
I cannot,
you know?
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I do think I visited this lady's property, and it is worth a visit just to see how bad it is. And further to that, I just point out to you that the land which she is complaining about has been fenced in by a very good fence, metal fence, and obviously some public body went to the bother of fencing it in. And yet
Not
nobody claims ownership of this particular land.
Oh, God.
So it adds insult to injury
Yeah.
as far as she
Yeah.
is concerned.
Yeah.
But she's
Yeah.
persistent and dogged. There is a TV programme arising out of this, and I think it will cause some embarrassment to government here generally.
Yeah, yeah. It's just governments and authorities washing their hands. And I'm
Yes,
sure
they're
they feel
either
that, yeah.
avoiding responsibility or evading responsibility. I suppose to be charitable, they're avoiding responsibility, but there could well be an element of evasion here. But if there is a public nuisance,
Is evasion more proactive than avoidance?
yeah, I mean, it's something needs to be done, and the individual cannot do it. Therefore, the public agency, a public agency acting on behalf of the Northern Ireland Executive, should deal with it. And it is a matter of public policy. And this is a public nuisance, which is affecting private citizens. So something must be done. If it was a disease
You'd be on it.
spreading throughout the countryside, then public health or somebody like that would deal with it. But this is a disease of sorts. It's a disease in terms of an invasive vegetation,
It is
and therefore
harming-
something
harming
should be done
environment and-
by the Northern Ireland Executive.
I agree with Alden. I think
Yeah,
really
sure.
do.
Okay, members, we'll do that then, and we'll keep the debate alive, hopefully,
Yes,
you know.
very much, Chair.
Okay, so also then next item, members, is table report following the informal meeting with the Ulster Architectural Heritage Society last week, and it's in your table pack on page 38. Members, would you agree that we send this to the department? Okay. Next item 6 on consultation, members. Item 6.1 on page 60 is a synopsis of responses to a consultation on the draft local government reorganisation. That's compensation for diminution of emoluments regulations. Have to get your tongue around it. The proposed consulted on, the consulted on proposed regulations to allow for compensation to be paid in the form of a pay protection period for 3 years to 10 employees who transferred as a result of local government reform, where a new council wished to vary their contract of employment with their agreement within certain criteria. The consultation asked whether the proposal should apply to local government. The department found that the act under which the regulation is made is contradictory in the provisions for compensation. The department sought legal advice, which advised that the definition of the term loss in the act should be amended to exclude the word loss or diminution of emolument in order for this consequential amendment to take effect. The Department must first consult, then propose an amendment to the Act by draft affirmative regulations. So, are members content to note this? Content? Okay. It's a technical change, really. Item 6.2 on page 65 is a synopsis of responses to a consultation on a proposal for mandatory wearing of helmets on motor tricycles. The consultation ran from 24th June until the 19th of August. A total of 104 responses were received to the consultation. The majority of these opposed the proposal. That's 91.35%. The Department has looked at, however, that all the major emergency services in Northern Ireland who deal with the aftermath of road traffic collisions are in favour of the proposal, and the Department intends to proceed with the implementation of this policy proposal into legislation in the next Assembly mandate. Are members content to note?
Yeah.
Okay. Then item 6.4 on page 97 is a synopsis of responses and departmental response to the entertainment licensing review. The purpose of this consultation was to give all interested parties the opportunity to consider and comment on the 36 recommendations made by the review group. The consultation ran from 1st May to 26 June 2015. A total of 26 responses were received to the consultation, providing comments and views on the recommendations. The Department now intend to prepare further, more detailed proposals, which will be the subject of a public consultation later this year. Members, are you content to note?
Content.
Okay. And committee members, would you like to suggest to the Department that this provides a copy, that it provides a copy of the synopsis of responses to the incoming committee? Well, I suppose they would. They would really. I'm sure they would automatically do that. Yeah. Okay. Next is SL1's item 7. The first one is the Groundwater Amendment Regulations NI 2016 on page 198. The purpose of this rule is to make minor technical amendment to the Groundwater Regulations NI 2009 in order to take account of amendments made to a Commission directive on the protection of groundwater against pollution and deterioration. The amendments are technical in nature, therefore a consultation is not required. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution procedure in the Assembly. It is proposed that the order will come into operation on 20th June 2016. If members, are you content actually to ask the Department to proceed? Okay, content?
Yeah.
Okay, to proceed with making the rule. The next one is SR, that's the draft Local Government Community Planning Partners Order, NI 2016, members on page 210. Members, there is a covering memo on page 211, the draft Local Government Community Planning Partners Order NI 21 at page 215, and correspondence from the Department at pages 221 to 230. The rule has been formally laid in the Business Office, but members, now in there, in the explanatory memorandum, it says the draft order was approved by the Environment Committee on the 28th of January. In fact, we really haven't approved it. We have stated our reservations on a number of issues. So we considered the SL1 at our meeting on the 28th of January this year. At that time, we agreed that the Department should proceed with the proposed statutory rule. when it would be formally considered by the committee. We let it go on to SR, but certainly we did say that we have reservations or some members had reservations on the draft order regarding the absence of departments as a statutory partner and the role of CCMS as a statutory partner, given its membership in the Education Authority, which is also a statutory partner. Also, members, may be of interest to you is that I received a response from the Department of Education, from the Minister, when I put in a written question to clarify about the position of the Education Authority and CCMS. So it's in this one. So what it says to members, you should have a copy of that. It says the Education Authority has statutory responsibility to secure sufficient education provision for all pupils and to plan for controlled schools. The Council for Catholic Maintained Schools has statutory planning responsibilities for the Catholic maintained sector. So now that is in relation to the area planning support structures, and which include the area planning steering group, the area planning working group, and the area planning local groups. So now it is not specifically about the the community planning partners, but maybe in a way it's kind of explaining why maybe CCMS would want to be in the community planning partners. So now, members, we would certainly want to let the department know that we do have reservations about the two issues. It's not we approve the that they should proceed without our reservations. Members, have you any views now on that one?
Yeah. Chair. Yeah, I know Sandra Overend originally raised it, and
yes, yes, that's right.
I know she was never left certainly any feeling of contentment of it, and neither would I. But I mean, certainly I'm not going to be voting against or anything today, but just to state that we still do have those reservations, but understand where we are with it and why it is as it is. You probably have to live with it, quite frankly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We could put that in the minutes that while we approve this, we do have reservations.
Yeah.
And maybe.
Well, Chair, that was part of the handover I got from Sandra as well, just on what Pam has said there. So yeah, certainly. Yeah. I want it recorded that we do have reservations.
Yeah. And I know Sinn Féin members and myself, we are concerned about the government departments and not, I think all members, we're concerned about government departments not in it. So, how are we going to make departments to have buy-in into this? That's a big question there. Yeah, so, okay, then members, then I will then put, so if members are content, then I'll put the following question to you then, that the Committee for the Environment has considered the draft Local Government Community Planning Partners Order, Northern Ireland 2016, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, recommends that it be affirmed by the Assembly. Are members agreed? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Then the next item, members, is the draft Local Government Standing Orders Regulations NI 2016, and it's on page 233. Members, there's a memo from the clerk on page 234 and the revised SR. That's the draft Local Government Standing Order Regulations NI 2016 at page 237. Just to, it's been a long process on this, members, just maybe refresh your memory. Officials briefed the committee on 8th of October and the 5th of November on proposed amendments to the draft regulations after the Assembly voted against the proposals in February. The purpose of the regulation is to give practical effect to the arrangements for the protection of the interests of minorities in council decision-making. Concerns were raised about the lack of a future mechanism for decisions which must be taken by a qualified majority. The committee asked officials for additional information, specifically why the change was necessary, what the impact is on people and communities, and consideration for a panel of solicitors. Officials addressed the first 2 points at the meeting on 5th of November. However, members agreed to defer consideration of the route until the Minister had formally agreed a position regarding how the proposal for a panel of solicitors must be administered. The Department has now written to the committee indicating that the Minister has concluded that it would not be appropriate to further revise the draft regulations at this stage to provide for a panel, as the policy on this issue will take some time to consider and develop as a method of its establishment, selection of panel members and funding issues must be considered and consulted upon. It would not be possible for a position to be reached on the way forward within this Assembly mandate. However, the Department has advised that there is no reason to delay the making of standing orders regulations, as these elements are not dependent upon one another. The statutory rule is subject to affirmative resolution procedure and and just want to say to the regulations have not yet been formally laid, so the committee then, if members want any further information, we have the officials here. We have Julie, Nicola and Stephanie here if you want further information from the officials. Pam.
Chair, yeah, I would be happy to take further information, but don't think I would want to certainly proceed with this today either, because certainly as a party we are not content with it as it is. It's quite complex, an issue, I'm sure officials will agree to, and it's something that I have inherited from another colleague. But we certainly would not be content with as it is, because we're not clear what the rationale is from moving from the statutory test. So certainly if the officials want to speak to us now, I'm happy enough with that, but
yeah,
certainly not content as it is.
We could strike yeah. Members, you're happy we invite you? And
yeah, because we do need more information on it, Chair. So.
Okay. Julie and Nicola. Yeah. Okay, Pam, you've heard Pam's earlier explanation about the dissatisfaction.
I think one of the issues that has been raised is why the wording doesn't really accord exactly with what's in the Act. And this is something which we got long and protracted legal advice about, that we couldn't actually use that wording in the regulations because it would be ultra vires, because the legislation doesn't actually provide for this merit principle. in the primary legislation, so we had to find another means of wording that to provide a filter mechanism. And that's why we've provided the wordings that if, in the opinion of the solicitor or barrister, they believe that the decision would be unlawful, would be contrary to convention rights or EU rights, or would be contrary to the equality scheme of the council, then that would require a qualified majority. So it does provide a filter mechanism, but it basically requires, it is as far as we can go with the filter mechanism within the powers that we have in the 2014 Act.
So you have now put down the criteria
Yes.
for it.
But we actually sought, originally we sought legal advice on adding the wording that is in the 2014 Act as the filter mechanism, and we got advice from senior counsel that no, that would be ultra vires.
Okay.
Because one of the things is you're not, it's the solicitor or barrister should be being asked to give an opinion on a point of law,
Okay.
not on a merit principle, and that's what we've provided.
Just for clarity for me, well, I'm not clear about any of it, quite frankly, but is this the reason why then you haven't gone for the disproportionate adverse community impact test?
Yes. That had originally been in a draft of the regulations which were consulted on. It wasn't actually applied during the transitional period. It was something which, when we were consulting on the draft regulations, we had this merit test in only whenever the regulations were scrutinised by DSO. They actually said we needed to take that out because it would be ultra vires if we had that merit test in.
The wording wasn't incompatible with the legislation to begin with?
Yes, but it's the fact that you're actually placing the onus on the barrister or solicitor's opinion as to whether it would require to be taken by a qualified majority. It's that linkage between the opinion of the barrister or solicitor acting, as basically the decision on whether something would be required to be taken by a qualified majority. What we've got now is to make it, and it is intra vires, to make it clear that the view of the barrister or solicitor will be on a point of law, and if on a point of law they consider that a decision has been taken that would be contrary to a council's powers, that would be contrary to convention rights or EC legislation, or would be contrary to the equality scheme of the council, then in those cases it would require a qualified majority.
So it's really setting the boundary.
It is.
of
It's
what-
specifying,
Yes.
the,
Yes, much clearer.
yes.
Yeah.
And it is providing the filter.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I accept what you're saying, but I certainly wouldn't be content moving with this today. So
What-
I would have to go back to my party and see what my position is on it, but
Okay. Is this is under affirmative
yeah.
resolution?
It is,
It could go to if we proceed today, it will go to plenary, and then suppose that would be at that stage it would be discussion and then voting.
And once it's formally led, it will come back to the committee for the committee to take a formal decision on it.
Is there still time enough if you go back to your party and we look at it again next week? Time enough for scheduling this?
We already have it penciled in the
I think so. I
schedule,
know. I
but we
saw
were
that.
actually hoping that we would be able to lay it officially tomorrow, so that it would be in time.
I think I remember it's on the 8th of March, is it?
14.
14th of March. That's the last week.
Once it gets formally led, it will come back to
So plaques saying that you can actually go ahead and lay. You don't need us to say whether you can go ahead and lay it, but we can bring the issue back next week and then form a decision next week.
If the committee were content to let it proceed today, if the committee were content with that, then we would revisit it again once it has been formally led in the way that we've done with the community planning. We wouldn't be putting the formal question today. It's just whether or not you would be content with the policy content, and then the committee would revisit it and make a decision as to whether or not you would wish to recommend that it be affirmed. And that can be take that,
Okay.
if the committee
I see
were
what you mean.
content to let it proceed to the next stage.
So
Okay.
that would be next week, we would say that.
Next week then.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if we say no, or if it's, there's a dispute about it, what then happens?
Well, that would be a matter for the Minister in terms of whether he chose to move that motion then the
And would the
following week.
department then bring it to the floor of the Assembly? Is that what happens?
It would probably already be in the order paper at that stage just because of time scale.
Yeah, it's
So
in
it-
provisionally already.
Yeah, and
Yes.
it would be on the actual order paper, so it would be a matter for the Minister whether he,
Deciding whether to
Just
withdraw
do
or
it.
whether you wanted to.
So there would be a vote on the floor of the Assembly then?
Yes.
Yeah. Fair enough.
If there's any further information that we could provide for you for next week, if let us know.
Okay. Next week is our last week now. Next week is the last week of the committee meeting. Okay. Pam, it's actually in from page 2. Quite a bit of information from page 233. You can bring back to your party. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Nicola.
Thank you.
And then, yeah. Sorry? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just sum up, members, you're content. Then we bring this issue back next week for the committee to look at. Then we can, during plenary, then recommend, whether we recommend it or not. Yeah, happy with that? Okay.
Yep.
And yep.
Don't
Then-
feel like the word content on that sentence, but yes,
Yeah.
I know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. That's what
Yeah.
we have decided. We
Yes.
have agreed. That's what steps we will take. Okay. Yeah. Then next item is SR on the producer responsibility obligations. Members, we've looked at all this before. I'm conscious of the time. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution procedure. The rule will come into operation on 21st March 2016. If members are content, I'll put the following question to you. The Committee for the Environment has considered SR 2016/79, the Producer Responsibility Obligations, Packaging Waste Amendment Regulations NI 2016, and subject to the report of the examiner of statutory rules, has no objection to the rule. Members agreed? Okay. Then next item is in your tabled pack, page 43, which is correspondence from the department providing a copy of the producer responsibility obligations regulation, obligation packaging waste, and notifying the committee of the UK-wide regulation that will be made by DAFRA. Members content to note? Okay. Then correspondence, item 11.1 on page 268 is an update from the department providing research findings and next steps in relation to developer contributions to affordable housing. Members content to note? Okay. Item 11.2 on page 364 is a letter from the department informing the committee that it will be writing to councils and stakeholders inviting nominations from any coastal or inland waters that could meet the required criteria to be taken forward as candidate sites for potential inclusion in the list of formally identified bathing waters. Content to note? Okay, more beaches, more swimming places. Well, I don't mean more beaches, but more approved swimming beaches. Item 11.3 on page 367 is a response from the department to the Art Committee regarding nitrogen levels in turkeys. Content to note?
Yep.
11.4, page 370 is correspondence from Finance and Personnel Committee, providing correspondence from DFP to points raised in 2 Assembly research papers relating to the Executive Draft Budget 2016-17. Content to note? Okay, next item, invitation to a conference. Members, content to note?
Content.
On page 386. Next item, 11.6, is an NIEL's Bulletin, February 2016. Members, content to note? Okay. Forward Work Programme is on page 395. Members, content to note? Just remind members then, our next meeting on Thursday, 10th of March, will take place in Athby, in Newfort Lane in Belfast. Okay, so members, we need to confirm as soon as possible whether you will be able to attend, and also because they are going to have lunch for us before catering purposes as well. Members, you'll be making your own way, I'm sure, to there. There should be plenty of car parking spaces. Yep.
And well, there will be some decisions that the committee will have to take as well, so we will need to be quorumed. So,
Important, yes. So can people indicate now, will you be going?
I've already
Alistair?
confirmed, so.
You'll be going, yeah, you'll be going. Tom, you'll be going. Then Ian and Barry, will you be going to the next week's meeting?
I'm sending apologies. Ian's definitely going.
Good, good,
And so's Cal Boylan going.
Oh, good, good,
Yeah,
good.
so I
Okay.
have to keep up with the
Because
numbers there.
we need quorum for
Thanks very much, Barry.
decisions. So, members, then no AOBs. Any AOBs from anybody? Then it will be next week, 10 o'clock, at the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute in Belfast. So, oh, sorry, we have now, don't go. We have to move to closed session, quick one,
Yeah.
just to look at the committee legacy report. And we're going to move into closed session, Sharon. Okay, we need to turn off the...
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate, Programme Sound.